about sports.
All right, guys. Usually when we begin our show, we're sitting here having some fun, talking about. We all have games on the TV as we're about to do the show. But tonight the games are silent.
Wow.
It's a result of the pandemic, and certainly sports is leading the way. In this instance, we started with the NBA pushing back their season, and college and baseball, hockey, they've all gone the way. And when you're going through something like this, I mean, games aren't exactly the most important part of it. We can certainly do without them if it's going to help stop the spread of this. It's symbolic how sports has kind of led the way there. In 1947, sports led the way in racial equality with Jackie Robinson playing with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And in 1950, there was a gentleman from Westinghouse High School, certainly here in Pittsburgh for you guys outside the area, who was a star there, became a star at Duquesne University, and then in 1950, with the Boston Celtics, became the first African American drafted in the NBA. He's certainly a remarkable man. And I've had probably the biggest pleasure of my writing career doing the research and writing his story with his son, Chuck Cooper III, who is joining us tonight. Chuck, how you doing?
Hey, it's a pleasure. What a joyful experience. Dave, you truly amaze me with your research.
Well, I'll tell you what, your father, every step of the way, has just proved to be an amazing subject, an amazing human being. Certainly something I know you're proud of today with the incredible efforts you've done over the years to not only get his name known, to get his eventual rightful place in the Hall of Fame, but to do the work he was so proud of, helping his community, helping the people who needed for so many years after he retired from the NBA, and you've continued that legacy. We know the story of Chuck Cooper, the basketball player, a little better. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Chuck Cooper, the man?
Well, thank you so much. Let me just start by how truly blessed me and my three sisters, Carolyn, Kathy, and Cheryl, and my mother, my late mother, Irva Lee, were to have him as the leader of our family. He was a father first. He was a family man first. He didn't hang out. He came home and looked forward to being with his family and spending time. But he was just somebody that was very, very compassionate about other people. Quick story. I don't even know if I shared this with you, David, during our research. I remember I must have been probably about 8 years old when we were walking across the 6th Street Bridge, and there was a homeless person asking for money. He stopped and gave him some money and spent time with them. And I'm a young kid. I'm like, Dad, why did you do that? And he said, Chuck, listen, he said, let me tell you something about life. You never know. If you fall out and need someone to give you mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or call the paramedics or bring you back to life, it might be that guy, right? So he just was somebody that looked at everyone equally. And one of the biggest blessings I had as a young man, when I ran my youth programming, I realized how important it was to be exposed to different people, to different things, to different places. But I was exposed early on to guys like, Merle Gillen from PNC. Wherever he went, he fit in and he cared about people equally. And whenever he could help, his fellow citizens, that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's the one thing he was such a remarkable man that as I would find out things, as I would talk to your family, and just, is this guy real?
Yeah.
I mean, and the story actually got to me after basketball. I thought basketball would have been what the story that would have most inspired me, but it was the stuff after that really got to me.
Wow.
So Chuck, the
That says a lot. I appreciate that.
foundation you started in your father's name is celebrating its 10th anniversary. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate that your big event had to be rescheduled with everything that's going on. But, talk about the foundation and how it sort of aims to do a lot of the things that embodies what your father was all about.
I'm smiling because that's a long story. I don't know. I don't know if you want all that, Chris. But you know what? I'll be honest. I used to work for Pete Flaherty, who ironically hired my dad as the first African American city department director when he
Really?
hired him to run Parks and Recreation, which David knows this back in the day came with death threats. And so, I'll be honest with you. I was a young man at the time. I was about 26 years old, and I was with my buddy on the Homewood playground, drinking a 40. I'll keep it real with you guys. Enjoying a 40 with one of my buddies, and his sons were playing on the playground. And I always carry, being an athlete in Pittsburgh, I always carry like basketballs and footballs and stuff like that in my car. So I could tell his sons were getting bored. And I pulled a football out and I started playing catch with his sons. Two sons. They were about 8 and 10 at the time. And I started having them doing, button hooks and down and outs and, fly patterns. And before I knew it, there were like 30 kids lined up wanting to join in and play. And of course, we accepted them in. But it was a wake up call for me. I said, I got to do something. This is back when Pittsburgh was having a serious gang problem. And part of the problem was, the kids didn't have an alternative, constructive alternative. So, I knew then that was God telling me that I needed to do something. So, and a couple of days later, I was coming home. So I grew up in East Hills. We lived right below the East Hills basketball park and playground, where my father, ironically, again, pushed this through. One of the things he accomplished when he was director of Parks and Recreation. But it's a beautiful playground up there. There's a swimming pool, baseball fields, basketball courts, tennis courts. There's a shelter where it almost serves as a stage in a rolling hillside where you could do concerts. It's one of the best kept secrets in Pittsburgh. So again, this is where I grew up. So I came home one day from the office working for Pete, and I heard all this loud music, right? And a serious smell of marijuana. I thought I was gonna get a contact for real, but it was really reeking weed, right? So I said, let me walk up here and see what's going on. So when I got to the top of the hill, the gang members and the drug dealers, they had these monster trucks parked on the basketball court. So the young, and this was during the day. This is like 5 o'clock, 5:30. So the young kids, the same park I grew up playing on, they couldn't even play basketball if they wanted to. So I said, okay, well, I just had the situation in Homewood. I see what's going on in my own neighborhood. The kids can't even play. So I ran a basketball clinic, and we cleared them out. And David knows the story, but it came with a lot of resistance. So because I was born and raised in that neighborhood, and pretty much grew up in that neighborhood, I knew the kingpin. But he had to come sit with me for about 5 days just to, let his underlings know that, it's okay. And my life was threatened. But because he did that, we were able to start a basketball clinic. We turned it into a full-fledged after-school program. Dwayne Woodruff, my buddy, number 49, the great Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback, was on Ronald McDonald's Children's Charities Board at the time. He got us a grant through Ronald McDonald's Children's Charities. We got state-of-the-art computers. But they were 386 machines. Like now our cell phones are like more powerful than our computers. But back then, so this is what we did. We didn't have a grade point average requirement, but the kids had to come in and do their homework. They had to take computer classes. We had tutors, mentors, and we exposed them to great role models. So that was something I was compassionate about. And some of the biggest hugs I get right now are from those young men and women that were in that program. And they say, hey, Chuck, without you doing what you did, I don't even think I would be here. And we lost, some of my closest guys, even my own little cousin who I was a guardian of at one time, to gang violence. So, when you work with a program like that, you just really want to save one. If you save one person, it was worthwhile. But at the same time, we have an orthopedic surgeon, we have a district magistrate, teachers, and a lot of success stories that came out of that program. And it was a sacrifice. I mean, I went home every day, 5 days a week, for about 10 years, giving back to that community. So, yeah, Chris, I told you it was a long story.
Yeah, but it's a good one, Chuck. By the way, we would have daily patterns, but we'd have them to go long all the time. That was what we would do.
I'd never get the ball. I'd never get the ball.
So I got a call from you guys to know this thing. I got a call from Bill Nunn.
Wow.
the great scout of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he said Tom Rooney wants to get in touch with you. He said Duquesne University, PNC. And then when I heard it was a Rooney family, they want to start the annual Chuck Cooper Classic at Duquesne University. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I know how my father felt about Duquesne. I know how he felt about PNC. The Rooney family, one of the great families of Pittsburgh. I mean, how could I say no? Right?
Yeah.
But what they didn't know is I'll never, ever in my life do anything in my father's name that doesn't have an educational component to it. So I said, this is the opportunity. I miss, it was called the Chuck Cooper Youth Development Association, the CCYDA. We had the Boston Celtic green and white uniforms. So I really missed that working with the kids. So I said, this is the opportunity to use this recognition that we'll get through the Chuck Cooper Classic to start the Chuck Cooper Foundation. So I went to Tom Rooney. We went to Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney. no pun intended, right? You know what I mean? It's all about relationships in this great world we live in. And we started the Chuck Cooper Foundation. PNC gave us the seed money. We started. I had just got laid off from pharmaceutical sales. And when I told my wife I was going to start a foundation from scratch, she looked at me like, what? She was thinking about those foundation bonus checks, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my family has really written away because it was really a sacrifice. And we're at the point now where we've awarded, $250,000 in scholarships. Just out of, that story that I talked about. And, we got some great people involved in some great corporations. Like, I hate to do a commercial, but I really have to. I mean, we enjoy great corporate support like UPMC, Highmark. Somebody told me, they said, anytime you get UPMC and Highmark on your team, that's pretty good. Right? Yeah. PNC, Reed Smith, Coppers, Huntington, just so many corporations that have come in and really helped and really supported us and allowed us to roll up our sleeves. So we expanded the scholarship program. We started by giving graduate level scholarships because it tied into my father's NBA career. He got his master's degree after his NBA career, which was very rare for any player, right? Especially African Americans at that time. So that was our niche. And then we decided to do leadership development. And now my favorite part, because I love young people and giving them hope and encourage them and hopefully motivating them and inspiring them through my father's legacy. But we have an outreach program where we go in and we talk about, my father's historic career, and we use our young graduate scholars as people a little bit younger than me. We call them relatable role models to share their stories of success. And really, again, I'm really truly blessed and honored not only to make a difference and be able to help some young people out, but to do that at the same time where I'm lifting my father's name and still giving back to the city that we both love, that we all love. Again, it truly is an honor and a blessing. Chris, I told you that story was long.
Yeah, but that's a good one. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can't see me, Chuck, and that's probably good, like you said, like these guys are joking. But, I probably wasn't as in rough of circumstances some of those kids you referred to helping, but I was one of those kids. You know, I grew up in Harrisburg, and, you know, the decline of things like the boys clubs and the Salvation Armies, it's a huge loss, you know, and it kind of falls on people like yourself to fill that gap. I wouldn't have met these guys. I wouldn't have gotten to Duquesne University if I didn't have those things. And a lot of those guys in those days, you know, they were dedicated to helping a kid. And they would tell me, look, you're bright. You got a chance. You don't need to play basketball
Yes.
or baseball or whatever. You know,
So they
there's just
lied
not
to you,
enough of
Gary,
that.
is what you're saying.
What's that?
They lied to you, is what you're telling
Yeah,
me.
they probably did. They probably did. But I mean, I think that kind of thing is amazing, because you got to step in and fill a gap of a lot of things that really have gone away. You know, so I give you full credit for that. I have to ask you a different thing. How fulfilling must it have been for you? Dave was away, and I was watching that induction ceremony. How fulfilling must that have been for you to see that who's who, uninvited, come up there and stand on that stage to recognize your father's contributions to what is now a powerful international business? How fulfilling must that have been for you to experience that?
I think you said it right at the end. You know, back when my father integrated the NBA, it was just, you know, really starting up. And, you know, and where it is today, the NBA is probably maybe second to soccer, the most diverse league on the planet.
Yep.
And to know that he played a role in that integration, and to be affiliated with an organization as great as the Boston Celtics, who to this day continue the you know, as far as breaking barriers, social justice. The Boston Celtics organization to this day, that's a part of their DNA. So, you know, to know that my father took him so long to get into the Hall of Fame, to have, you know, the who's who of basketball. You're talking about Dr. J, Bill Russell, Elgin Baylor, Kareem,
Yep.
Isaiah Thomas, Tommy Heinsohn, Manny Jackson, Dominique Wilkins. And, you know, I don't want to name them all, but listen, geez, I tell you what, it really let me know, you know, how much they appreciated. And I think most importantly, my father's sacrifice, you know, what
Yep.
he endured, you know, because David and I, through doing the research, and we were thinking about, we was like, wait a minute, you know, when my dad came through Duquesne University in the NBA, this is before the Civil Rights Amendment. You know,
Yeah.
this was before Emmett Till. I mean, so we were in an ugly country that was doing ugly things, and David and I were thinking like we were just trying to like get inside my dad's head. Like, you know, we're looking at some of these great games that he had. We're like, what was he like? How do you perform like that, knowing what the possibilities are and what's going on around you, and still be able to perform on an All American and All Pro level or All Rookie level, which he did his first year in the NBA. So, you know, to know these
Yep.
guys came out to recognize, you know, his contribution, in my humble opinion, and I'm biased, the greatest game in the world was something that we're forever grateful and I'll never ever forget.
Well, I'll just add, we talk a lot about history on these shows because you know, if you can't remember the past, you can't understand the present and really appreciate the future. And in professional sports today, there's not enough recognition of the past, and particularly the founders, the initial contributors. To me, it was completely heart-filling. I couldn't believe I was standing up in my basement clapping.
Wow, I appreciate it.
It was just a tremendous moment of recognition of somebody who really made a tremendous contribution that unfortunately just isn't thought about enough today.
Hey, but you know what, Gary? I'll tell you, you know, that's huge, and I know my father's smiling down, you know, for that tremendous honor and recognition. But you know, when you think about UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse, you
Yep.
know, the historical plaque that he's just got awarded, that's going to be, you know, somewhere
Mhm.
around that building. I think like right on Forbes Avenue.
Mhm.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, the thing that really would get him right now, I know if he rode past PPG Arena and stopped at the Mac machine to get some money, and he saw that building with Duquesne University and PNC, which, you know,
Yeah.
the predecessor was Pittsburgh National Bank, where he worked. I mean, that would just really melt his heart. So, you know, all the recognition that he's getting is just, you know, it's almost unbelievable to me. But the reason why I believe it is because I live with him, and I know how much he poured into Pittsburgh, and I know how much he poured into the people of Pittsburgh. So, and I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh, and I know the kind of DNA that we all have. You know, Pittsburgh is one of those cities. If you put your work in, and you're really authentic, and you're true to who you are, and you're willing to reach back and help other people, you know, this is one of the few cities I think out here that you truly get appreciated and rewarded. And you know, he died early. But I know, trust me, I know he feels all of this incredible recognition. And we as his family, you know, now I know that, you know, my daughter, I have a 10-year-old daughter, you know, her kids will be able to come back to Pittsburgh and see that historical landmark, you know, see UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse. You know, I just can't tell you how much we appreciate it as a family. And when I go to the Duquesne games, you know, the love that I get from the fans, the love that I get from Coach Dambrot, who shares a family legacy and history, and Dave
Yep.
Harper and Kim Gormley, and again, most importantly, just the general fans, you know, the Duke fans. It's just something that's hard to really put in words. But you know, I just want to continue to support the program and give back as much as I can.
Yep.
Well, and I mean, you talked to Kane, and going back to the time your father played, what they did to further destroy segregation in sports and college basketball. There was a game on December 23rd, 1946, scheduled to play Tennessee at McKeesport. Much talk a little about that moment in time that sometimes gets forgotten, yet is, to me, one of the key sporting historical happenings in this city's history.
Well, just like I say that, you know, and it's starting to change. The Boston Celtics, Walter Brown and Coach Red Auerbach, they don't get nearly the credit they deserve for pulling the trigger and breaking the barrier in the NBA. Duquesne doesn't get nearly the credit that it deserves as a great university for when they took that stand. When the University of Tennessee came here to play, and David, you know the history. I'll let you share some of the details of the history if you like to. But basically, they came to play Duquesne, and they said, "Hey, listen, Chuck Cooper can't play," and Duquesne said, "Screw you, Chuck Cooper's playing," and they sent the University of Tennessee home without a game, and I really think that was the initial bond. And I say initial because I think it was continuous throughout my father's life. I know he helped recruit guys like Norm Nixon and B.B. Flannery and some of the other greats at Duquesne. So he worked hard on the university up until he passed. But I tell you, I think that was the initial bond that really was forged between my father and his beloved Duquesne University. And again, Duquesne, I mean, that was a major stance. David, this guy here, you guys gotta get David talking a little bit. Some of the research that this guy has done is just simply amazing. But that wasn't the norm. Most universities were holding their African American players and sitting them on David's favorite thing, on the bench. They were sitting them on the bench. They weren't playing them. And Duquesne, again, they said no. Chuck Cooper, if Duquesne tips off and Chuck Cooper's on our team, we won't tip off unless Chuck Cooper is playing. And that's just huge because, you're talking about 1946. That's huge. So to this day, I always wanted to play for Duquesne, like father, like son. But I just feel like I'm part of that Duquesne family, and I'm sure that every generation of my family going forward is going to feel the same way. We're going to always appreciate, what Duquesne University did to stand up for my father.
Absolutely. It was, John Maurer was a legendary coach with Tennessee at the time, and he would send notes to the Eastern colleges when he came up requesting that, I hear you have an African-American player, you need to sit him because my boys won't play on a court with them. And even Claire B. at Long Island, who recruited Chuck twice, when he first came out and went to West Virginia State, and then after he came back from the Navy and decided on Duquesne, he would sit his African-American players when Tennessee came up. But Coach Chick Davies and Judge Weiss, who was in charge of the athletic council that ran sports at that point in time, especially Judge Weiss, decided, no, this isn't going to be. And the players wouldn't go on the court either. That was the one thing that gets left out in this. Players refused to go on the court against Tennessee if Chuck couldn't play. And he's a freshman. He's only a few games into his tenure, so it's not like he had this incredible bond with these guys.
Right.
And he was one of the freshmen because they did.
I think David froze. Is
I
everybody?
don't know what.
There you go.
Yeah.
So they gave him 4 years.
Hey, we heard you say one of the freshmen, David. After freshman, you
He
froze up.
froze up probably because he heard
Oh,
that
okay.
track.
I'm sorry. He was one of the few freshmen that were able to play because they didn't recognize his time at West Virginia State because it wasn't in the NCAA and it was an African American school. So
Okay.
he's only a few games into his tenure. He doesn't have that, and the fact that the team did that for him, and a lot of it was his personality. He had a personality that would bring people together. And you could see that in his later life that he brought teams together. Jim Rohr who used to be the chairman of Pittsburgh National said that about him. He had ability to bring people together, and even so young in that situation. That to me is the amazing thing about it, and that time probably is one of the main reasons so many African Americans came to Duquesne at that point. They knew they'd get an opportunity to play. They knew Chuck was a captain his senior year, so they knew they would get the opportunity to lead, to be who they were, and not have to have their minutes restricted or their play on the court restricted. So to me, that was one of the amazing moments in Pittsburgh sports history that sometimes we forget about that game.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%, David.
And Chuck, I'm gonna follow you a little bit. I'm gonna give a shout out to Dave. I didn't realize that your dad had been named to an All NBA rookie team. I didn't know that they existed at that time.
Hey, nobody did except for the guy that originally wrote the article. I think to name the team, except for Mr. Finoli. How he dug that up, Chris, I don't know. But he's got so many pearls in this book, and I think the public is really going to enjoy when they get a chance to see all that he's uncovered.
Thank you.
Chuck, it had to be a difficult legacy for you to live up to also. I mean, how did you wrestle with that? I mean, I'm friends with Roberto Clemente Jr., and it's something that he always talks about is, living in that shadow and trying to always be cognizant of his father's legacy.
Well, I think it was a double-edged. That's a great question, Chris. I think it was a double-edged sword. It motivated me. I mean, it was father like son. I mean, I wanted to be just like my dad. And he told me early on, he said, Chuck, he said, when I was your age, I felt like I was on a mission. And I had a little bit too much fun. I didn't take the game as serious as he did. But, I tell people all the time, and when I get a chance to speak to young people, even though I didn't reach my full potential in the game, I was recruited by Jim Calhoun, a Hall of Fame coach. So I had to have a little bit of game, right? But I tell young people all the time, I got a free education out the deal, right?
Right.
So, I took advantage of the opportunity. But, to dig a little bit deeper into your question, it was tough. There were expectations that were set by other people. They expected me to play at a certain standard. And because of my father's character and how passionate he was about the game, people realized that, and I was having a little bit of fun and playing at the same time. So, but it was tough. But one thing that I'll never forget, that my dad was actually sick at this time, and he called me up to the room. He was leaving his room more and more seldom. And I'll never forget, he called me up and he said, Chuck, you know what? He said, I just want to let you know I'm extremely proud of you as a son. And, that was enough validation for me. He said, I never had to get you out of jail. Everybody's father can't say that, right? He knew that I was still on the path to get my college degree. So, and he knew that I was a young man who was protective over my sisters and family. So I think he felt, when he left this world that, I wasn't the perfect son, but I think he thought I was on the right track.
Yeah, I
Well,
would say
one thing that people need to know about this man was he was a Renaissance man. He was a fabulous cook, a fabulous chef. Taught himself to play the trumpet from a Miles Davis record at 40 years old. Could play piano by ear. Didn't read music or didn't use it much. And one of my favorite ones, he taught himself to speak Spanish so he could get the job in Lancaster. Why don't you talk about just
I never heard that before, Chris. See what I'm saying about this guy? How did he get that?
you can't wait to read the book yourself, huh, Chuck?
I can't wait. How did I miss that chapter, David? I don't know, but wow. I'm sorry, David. Go ahead. What's your question?
Oh no, I'm saying, kind of speak to, his artistic side, so to speak, which, I just found fascinating.
Well, he I gotta bring in my Uncle Cornell, who ran against Jesse Owens. My dad always said, he said, Chuck, your Uncle Cornell is by far the best athlete in the family. So but he was 15 years older than my father. He had world-class speed. He held a high jump record in the city of Pittsburgh for almost 30 years. But he also was an entertainer. I got pictures of my Uncle Cornell performing alongside Lena Horne.
Wow.
So he didn't make it in sports, but he transitioned to entertainment. So my Uncle Wendell also played by ear. They were incredibly. I'll be honest with you, and I don't want to, try to, exaggerate or anything. But we, from a Cooper standpoint, we were truly blessed. I mean, David, you know this. My father's mother and father were formally educated. Back at a time where we were coming off of where African Americans, it was illegal for them to get education. They were on the tail end of that. So they were formally educated to the tune where they both had teacher certificates. Although my grandfather said, he was only certified to teach colored only, but he was from Virginia Union College. We just had a family that was not just serious about education, but they were creative and they built their house, on Whittier Street, 634 Whittier Street, back at a time where, people just weren't doing that. That wasn't something that you did. So just an incredible close family. And I think his mom and his dad, they were very religious, but serious about, their education. And I think they're the ones that initially put, how important it is to serve the community and be good citizens. And, something that my father picked up, and he allowed us to express that freely. My sister played a little bit of trumpet after him, not quite as good, but she could play a little bit. My sister Carolyn and my sister Kathy played the flute. I was out playing basketball and football, so I didn't have any patience for the instrument thing. My aunt was my Uncle Cornell and my Aunt Cora, they had the first black radio show in Pittsburgh, where she would play the piano and he would sing. My grandfather, Daniel Webster Cooper, Pop Cooper, was the first African American postal worker. They tell me he was the first. I don't have the documentation on that, so I'll say he was one of the first. But what I do know from family stories is he scored so high on his civil service exam that they made him come in and take it again with extra monitors. Second time around, he got almost perfect score. So I think, and David, I hope you agree that when people get a chance to read the Chuck Cooper story, it's just not basketball. Being the first African American city department director, being PNC's first African American urban affairs, which is a position that they created for him with his unique ability to connect with the community. So there's so many layers to the story. When you hear the story about him and Bob Cousy, when back they went down to play a game in North Carolina, and they were at the Raleigh train station. And the only reason why they were there is because my father couldn't stay at the hotel. So his good friend Bob Cousy, they both like jazz and drinking a little bit of beer. So my dad he said, you know what, Red, I'll just go back to Boston. Bob said, Coop, I'll come with you. So Bob said, they stopped out, had a couple of beers, and they get to the train station. Now, my dad can't stay at the hotel. They get to the train station, and they got to take a leak. And they get to the bathrooms, and it's, separate, white only, black only. And Cousy just said, he just was crushed. He said he felt smaller as a human being than he did at any point in his life. And he just didn't know what to say to my dad. So what they decided to do was find back then they had surveillance cameras. There wasn't a lot of people out, so there was nobody out. And they walked down and got to the edge of the platform and decided to take a leak together. Right? So that was Cousy. That was his Rosa Parks moment. So, you got Walter Brown, who when he drafted my father, took a major financial risk because the Globetrotters were coming in barnstorm. And without that game against the Globetrotters, a lot of owners couldn't make payroll. So there was an unwritten rule that you couldn't draft an African-American player. My father was an All-American out of Duquesne. And, he got drafted with the 14th overall pick. Walter Brown was like, listen, I'm trying to build a winner. I could care less about that rule. And David's got some pearls about that story. So, I don't want to give the book away, David, but as a matter of fact, I'm not going to give the book away. But there's some more great stories that I think your viewers and people that know us, when they get a chance to read that book, they'll really be intrigued by it. And once you start that book, you're not going to want to put it down. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little about when we'll see it?
Well, March 25th. That's our day. I'll be honest. I'm gonna go live. With everything going on right now. And I do want to take a moment to to just say that everyone who has been affected by the coronavirus is in all of our thoughts and prayers. That's a tough situation. Not just the people that are affected with the virus, but the people who have to get quarantined and, how it affects their families. The NBA, who I'm so honored and blessed to be affiliated with. I really applaud Adam Silver for taking that really aggressive stand and canceling those games. But when you think just about, the overall global financial economy, and when you drill it down to, the workers at the arenas and the people who have to miss work to stay home with their kids because, there's a quarantine situation or the schools are closed. This thing is something that is unprecedented in my lifetime. And I just really want to, again, really extend my thoughts and prayers, to anyone that's affected by this. And I strongly pray that for some reason, it just, I don't know if the weather that we know as we went rolling to the warmer seasons that like the flu, it's a seasonal thing, and we get a chance to get ahead of it, but it's something serious. So to answer your question, we're hoping that we're able to release the book on March 25th, but we're certainly sensitive to what's going out here in our society right now, and as much as we want to get the book out, we're going to make sure that we're sensitive to everything that's going on, and not just in our country and in our city, but our world right now.
Absolutely, and it should be hopefully out by then. And we had some launch things that'll we're probably going to reschedule, so we'll talk about that on here and certainly send that out on Facebook. We have Chuck Cooper Breaking Barriers, Chuck Cooper the Chuck Cooper story on Facebook. If you look that up, please like the page, and certainly we'll give our updates through that as we go on. But gentlemen, it's certainly been an enlightening evening. I assume over the next couple of weeks as we go through this, and hopefully things will start to turn around at that point. But we're going to get into some of our favorite subjects, historical subjects on sports, and brighten it up. I know I'm using this time without sports to go through my DVD library every night and play a different special game in Pittsburgh history. I'm going to start with the 1955 NIT championship tomorrow, Duquesne and Dayton, which the great Sam Sculio, who's written several great books on Pitt had given me and Bob Healy, one of our co-authors. So we'll get on some of those subjects. Talk about. I'm sure Gary, you enjoy the 1919 Seattle Metropolitans, correct? That's not your favorite.
I almost didn't want to send it out, but that's the first thing that jumped into my head was thinking, boy, we haven't had a cancellation of a major title in 102 years, but we could face it now. I hate to say it, we could. So yeah, that's right. I don't have that on tape though, Dave. I don't have that one on tape, so I got to do that in my head.
We didn't get that one. That, of course, did Seattle win the Stanley Cup because of the flu pandemic back then?
They requested that they were awarded it, but I don't think the NHL has awarded a Stanley Cup winner.
Oh, they've never awarded it for that. Okay.
Yeah. They asked to have it awarded, but I think they were leading the series, and I apologize. I think they were leading the series, but there was no finality to it. So
Okay.
So that's what
No
happened.
problem.
So
We'll kind of hit on that. And we'll remind ourselves of what a great town this was it has been in sports history as we go through that, and hopefully by mid-April we'll all be talking about the last place Pittsburgh Pirates. And,
First place,
Well,
you know,
well, Dave,
that-
I got two more things. First of all, Chuck, I'm sorry I didn't wear my red Chuck Cooper Classic T-shirt. I have it upstairs in the drawer, but I do have my 1994 All-Star Game sweatshirt that I can still fit in, fellas. So
Yes.
I give you that.
no, that's an accomplishment.
and you're looking good. You're looking good, Chris.
well,
And Chuck,
I'm glad you held off talking about your urinating story with Gary at the top of towers in 1983. About his story.
he may like me. He was sneaking around. So, but no, Chuck, it's an honor to have you on here, and it's an honor to talk about your father too. It really is. It's a real honor for me, and yeah, I look forward to meeting you at some point.
Look
I
forward
mean,
to it.
all I'll say about Pittsburgh is this: I'm not a native Pittsburgher like you guys. I grew up in Harrisburg, and I got a chance to go to Duquesne. They gave me a lot of money, and unfortunately, I came out in 1984. There was nothing happening there, and I didn't have any money then either. So, although my wife was from Pittsburgh, we moved to the east. But
So you were the
still-
black cloud of Pittsburgh back then. Is that what you're
I
claiming?
probably was, yes. I probably was the reason. It started to turn around after that. But
All right.
my point about Pittsburgh, though, and I think your father's also a contributor to this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. You know, whenever somebody asks me about Pittsburgh, I always tell them, you don't understand what that city's like. That city's small. It's connected. People all pitch together. They see a case like you're talking about PNC. It's much different than a lot of other cities in America are. And I'm not saying that to humor anybody. I've been to a lot of places, and I spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh in college in the first couple years after I got out. It's a very unique place. People, they see a situation, they get together, big and small, institutional and private. They get together and they try to make an effect. And you're continuing to do that. It's appreciated. You know, I love Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Someday I may return there.
And let me tell you guys, hopefully by the time this book gets out and we get talking about it, that people realize not just what a Pittsburgh icon, legend, whatever you want to say, Chuck Cooper is. He is an American. He is one of the great figures in this country's history, and he's truly something people should aspire to be like. An unselfish. In fact, if not for this man right here, Chuck Cooper did not want the limelight. Chuck Cooper would have been a forgotten man. It's this man right here that we're talking to tonight, who has taken the torch for 30 years to get to the point where people now recognize him for what he should be recognized for. And I give you great kudos for that, my friend.
Well, I really appreciate that, but let me just say that I couldn't have done this by myself. There were so many great people, like the Rooneys, Duquesne University, the Boston Celtics, the NBA. Getting those great corporate sponsors that we have, like PNC and UPMC, that really jumped in, and they when I told them what I was trying to do and what I was trying to accomplish, and primarily it was to continue to help. Some young underserved students accomplish their goals and to raise my father's visibility, as we did just that, it truly was an easy sell. And again, the fact and the appreciation that I have when I see, how this city has embraced my father's legacy. Just gives me the motivation to continue to sacrifice and roll up my sleeves and to continue to use his legacy, to help other young people accomplish their goals and their dreams.
Absolutely. And he certainly would be proud and is proud of the job you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, David. And I got to say, again, I know I said it before, but to do this book with you and the whole process, David and I get a chance to jump on video conferences and we go through the chapters and, we're talking about things and flush stories out. And I get a chance to hear, the phenomenal research that this man did. There's a reason why you're Pittsburgh's favorite sports author. There's no question about that, and that's on the real. What you're doing right now, and the group of journalists that you've assembled to take the lead to make sure that Pittsburgh. So we do have and I agree with Gary. We do have a great history here, but history gets forgotten if you don't document it. So the guy, the job, Chris, the way you write, the guys that the job that you guys are doing to keep alive, Pittsburgh's history and the legacy of our sports. And David and I'm trying to get David to go beyond now sports. So, just continue. I'm just from someone who, is a Pittsburgher and a fan first. I was one of the million people that was at the game where Franco had the immaculate reception, right? My mom and my dad.
That's a little bit of a sore subject for Dave. I don't know if you know that. He'll have to tell you that offline here.
I love it.
I'll tell you the story of my dad making us leave after Kenny Stabler scores.
I love it. Hey, we were actually there at that game, and I'll tell you real quick. One thing I'll never forget at that game, and back then, it was still, it's not that it's like a wide open thing now, but there was even a little bit more tension, between diverse groups, and I just remember when Franco caught that pass, everybody just turned around and was hugging. And that's the first time, actually, as a young man. What year was that?
72.
71?
72. In fact, it was on the 26th anniversary of the Tennessee game, December 23rd.
I was 10 years old. And honestly, gentlemen, that's the first time that I saw white and black people embrace.
Wow.
With love. I mean, no one here. Everybody was hugging and kissing. Yeah. You know what? And that's the real. So it's just amazing what sports can do. And for you guys to continue to document that great history so we don't forget about those type of moments. I just want to take time to thank you for all that you do.
We got a lot more coming too. There's a lot of history to talk about in Pittsburgh that it's under Dave. Dave's the spearhead of it.
Yeah.
But who is it that came up with the saying when you play Pittsburgh, just take the team on, you take on the whole city? Who said that? Was that somebody in the NFL? Or
I think it was Dave. I think it was Dave who said that.
No, but wasn't there somebody when you play Pittsburgh, you play the whole city. You don't just play the team or something like that. I can't remember who that was.
Howard Cosell. That was Howard Cosell.
Just be careful. Working with Dave will age you prematurely.
And you know what? I remember. I'm gonna tell you something. Being born and raised in Pittsburgh, I remember being young. 8, 9, 10 years old, and I grew up in a neighborhood. We had a lot of kids, so we played football. We played all the sports. Back then we would knock on doors. If we were one man short, we go knock on your door to go find somebody to be the ninth man to field the baseball team, right? But I just remember if Pitt lost on Saturday and the Steelers lost on Sunday, I was teary-eyed, and the only way we could forget about it was to go play our own game. So that Pittsburgh, we die hard with our teams, and when they're losing, we're not the same. But we're in order for us to get over it, we're gonna make our own things happen, and that's just who we are as people from the Burgh.
It's true.
Absolutely. Fletcher used to do that with a wiffle ball in his 40s.
Dude, I called my shot, Dave. I called my shot.
Yes, you did. Of course, when he called it, he's going like this. But
I couldn't decide where it was going, but it was going.
I thought you were going to confuse the defense.
But thank you so much, Chuck. We certainly appreciate it.
It's a pleasure having you on. Honor. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Hey, hopefully it won't be the last time.
No. Yeah.
Well,
Open invite, my friend. Open invite.
Hey, if so, we'll have to write another book, David, so I can get back on. I only get on when I get a book coming out, so I'll get on one time.
you got it. You're going to be preferred guest.
Hey,
Too, Chuck, we're geeks. I mean, some of the stuff we talk about, you probably think, man, these guys are really crazy. Let me tell you.
I did my homework. I've seen your shows. You guys do a great job. I always enjoy watching it. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be on with you guys.
Likewise.
All right, you guys have a great night, and we'll be back next week talking half your time.
Take care.
I see you.